Good evening, everybody. If I can have your attention, please. My name is Aubrey Nielsen, and I am the Collections Manager with the Brownsville Historical Association. It is my job here to develop exhibits and curate content that you see throughout the museum. So if you have any questions in regards to the exhibit, feel free to ask me. So the exhibit itself, we designed this exhibit in honor of Historic Preservation Month. So it opened in May and it runs through July. Oh, can you hear me? Actually, before I continue? Barely. Barely? Okay. I'm very soft-spoken, so it's a little difficult. So it started in May for Historic Preservation Month. And in 2018, we were contacted by a local architect, Robert Velez, who had a collection of architectural drawings by Robert Velten, and he had them stored in his garage. He acquired these items from Mrs. Velten herself, so Mr. Robert Velten, the architect, during the time that he passed. So in order to preserve these items better for the museum, they brought them into us, and we have them here now. So I can't tell you how many pieces we have. It's over 2,000 sheets of paper. We have various rolls of various sizes of different buildings and different content, and that you'll see throughout the exhibit. So we chose to highlight Mr. Velten for this purpose, that he is a Brownsville native, one of the very few individuals here in Brownsville who is a very known architect, aside from Ruth McGonigal, who is also another individual. But we don't have her drawings. So the ones that you will see this evening are buildings that he helped design, as well as did some modifications to, which Mr. Juan Velez, who is our Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Brownsville, will let you know. And just a small fact, when you go through the exhibit, feel free to use your phones. We created QR codes on each of the text panels, so when you scan them, it'll lead you to where the building is today, and if it looks the same or if there has been changes to it. And I present to you Mr. Velez.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to introduce to you Bob Velten. As a Spanish architect, I think that I'm being born here but raised in Spain. I think that to me is one of the most, if not the most significant architect, at least in Brownsville, because precisely he's a native, and to me that says a lot. Also, he lived during a period that is mainly the mid-century modern period, where you will see then later how he got some kind of his designs and so, and he developed a style that at least we recognize as the absolutely 100% American style in Europe. That's what we think, that if you want to study American architecture, you start from the 50s without forgetting Brownsville, right, naturally, but mainly focusing in mid-century, because that's when the American architecture will simply highlight it and do his own path. So Bob Velten, as I said, was born in 1929 here in Brownsville, and that's a good year, because that year precisely was open the Brownsville airport, and you will see probably that impacting in his life, because he was a lover of flying and airplanes all his life. He attended local schools, and then he went to Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia. He learned to fly when he was 16 years old, and he flew during around 54 years. After graduation, he went to A&M, where he got a Bachelor of Architecture, and 1952 was his pivotal year, because he was commissioned into the Air Force, and also he got married with the love of his life, that is Agnes Tipton. Then Bob attended in 1954 the Witt-Patterson Force Base, Ohio, for 3 months, and immediately after he went to Okinawa as maintenance and repair officer at Kadena and Naha Air Bases. I'm not talking today about his residential houses, and especially his residential home that for me is absolutely outstanding, and it's located in Sunshine Road. And what I do feel is that he got a lot of, let us say, inputs, maybe from the north of Europe, Scandinavia, but also, and definitely from Japan, the way he worked, the fenestrations or certain kind of openings in the roofs or in the entry, or how he simply put the porch columns in the house, I mean, are amazing, are absolutely amazing. Thanks God that house was bought by someone with a lot of sensibility, and they have absolutely rehabbed the house, and well, it's gorgeous. I guess that someday we could have a guided tour so you could understand how an architect thinks, because that's very important, and how he created the spaces. Bob Velten was so picky that he ended, as far as I know, he ended doing his own brickwork in his house, because he knew how to do it. He's not a man that only does drawings and design and calculates and so on. No. He did also. I mean, he was able to work with his hands and to get all done. After Okinawa, or during Okinawa, he designed his first house there while waiting her wife and their daughter Valerie finally arrived in 1955, and the passion, as I said, was so big for the airplanes that he stayed during 8 years in the Air Reserve, and he was always attending the Air Force Association until his retirement in 1980, and well, he achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel. He was raised in the Central Christian Church. Let me see. This is the Central Christian Church that is located in East Levy Street. It was designed by Frederick Trimble, that it was a Canadian architect that arrived in Brownsville in 1926. The church was built in 1930, and the one that built the church was precisely his father, W.A. Velten. He was a very, very known contractor here in Brownsville, and naturally from him, probably he got his first input in architecture. What is something, a kind of anecdote, is that Frederick Trimble stayed here from 1926, I think that to 1933, that when unfortunately he went to visit his parents in Canada, but he suffered an accident in the airplane, and he died. So there are just a very, very few works of Trimble here in Brownsville. You can find the Sharp Elementary School that is located in Palm Boulevard. He worked also for the Brownsville Navigation District, all the works for the school district as well, and some houses, but it's not so many published or built by him here. So the Veltens were not only attending the Central Brownsville, the Central Christian Church, where he was raised naturally, because his father was already there, but he was also very active. Both Agnes and him were very active with the First Presbyterian Church, because that's precisely where they were married. So naturally, that things ties you into the corresponding church. The Velten soon moved to Austin, so Robert, that was 1956, so Robert could work with an architectural firm and get precisely much more knowledgeable regarding architecture. Nevertheless, they were always tied to Brownsville. If you see the newspapers of that era, they attend 2, 3, 4, 5 social events here. Relatives married here, or friends, so they were always here. So what had happened is that finally, in 1959, after his training as an architect in another firm, he opened his office in East Levy Street, this practically in front of the city building. He opened there because it was kind of close to the city hall naturally, and he would need to go and ask for permits and so on in the area. So it's better to have the office quite near. What happened is that he immediately started to have very good projects. He was focusing in public works, such as or for public or non-profit organizations. Good neighborhood settlement was one of those in 1960. The Woolworth building that we are going to analyze a little bit later in 1961. Then the Virginia and I.E.M. Simons Marydale William Pitnet House in 1964, and later on with an addition done on the 70s. The Brownsville Community Playhouse, that is our theater, that's a lovely building. Unfortunately, it's slightly altered. The Brownsville Independent School District Tax Office, that we will also review briefly later. The Darling Mauser Funeral Home, I think that his masterpiece, and probably, I don't think that is the best building, the best modern, mid-century modern building in Brownsville. And then also there's another office building in St. Charles, and there are other residents that I'm not going to speak because this is not the day. Even when he continued practicing individually, he noticed very soon, because he was really smart, that there were a lot of architects here. So in order to avoid competition from architect firms of other cities, what he found is, hey, let us try to merge into an association, so we avoid competition from elsewhere, and then especially from the BSD projects. Because what had happened is that on the 1960s, the BSD happened to have a lot of money, and also the population in Brownsville was growing so much that they need more schools, because there were a bunch of children. So the way to avoid that kind of competition was merging 5 architects here into what it was called the Brownsville Associated Architects. And that was constituted by Bowman, Swanson, and Hister, that already had their studio here. Later on also would come Young York, that was very known, and later on Boland and Walker and so other continuing this film. But in these days was Bowman, Swanson, and Hister. If you go through East Levy Street, you would see the Savings and Loan Bank. That's a project of the firm, built in 1963. That's another very, very important and interesting mid-century modern building that we have here. Will Height, that was associated with Wayans, that was the general engineer that worked here during the 1960s. And finally, Velten. This association will, let us say, evolution during the years, constituting finally design 5 architects, because still the firm were representing 5 architects. You know? So the group designed several schools, and I would say that notably the Brownsville High School on Price Road, what is known as the Homahana School. That school, that it was built in 1967, is the prototype of schools with central air conditioning, and indeed was one of the 3 most advanced schools built in Texas in that era. So that locates you of what was Brownsville in the 60s. You know, when we were really in the map, such as it's happening right now with all these kind of movements. So and that's pretty interesting, Ben, because there was plenty of work, and also we have a bunch of very, very good architects here. So let us, he unfortunately passed away in 2016, but fortunately he left us a lot of marvelous buildings. So let us go through the first building that we are going to take a look, that is the Darling Mauser. I have put here a little historic newspaper from the 1930 something. What happens is that both Hinckley, that served in Fort Brown, that was the very famous undertaker in Brownsville. He that was in the 20th century, end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. He was located in the corner of East Elizabeth Street, and he was already precisely specialized in undertaking with soldiers and medicine staff and so on and so forth. So in those days, burials weren't entirely very effective. You know? There's a history that an undertaker was just returning home when he saw a hand and then an arm and finally a head with a haunted face protruding from a grave along the main cemetery path here, saying, "Hey, I'm still alive." And the undertaker that was a very, neat and professional and quite scrupulous and following the rules, taking the shovel and throwing one shovel up there to his head, and he says, "No, what you are is bad buried." So please, if I die here, just remind to the people of the funeral home to dig a huge grave to me. You know, I know that there's a lot of water down, so just dress me with a bad suit and that's enough. So, in any case, probably to solve this problem, what happens is that Darling, W.A. Darling, decided to come here, and he started in 1923 in 12th and Adams. From 12th and Adams, he moved here. The business was later on moved to 1507, is Levy Street in 1926. And finally in 1939, he moved to this house. This house that was located in 734 East Levy Street, unfortunately was demolished. This was one of the brown houses here in Brownsville. What I have done is, you cannot see it because it's slightly blurry, the image, but it's reproducing exactly this building. You have a front shed here, and then you can see that it's a side gable with the rest of the structure here, and then suddenly you have a bay window and the rest. So that's how we work in historic preservation. You know? If someone wants to just imagine that the house still exists, okay, well, here we have a wonderful drawing, and that's the American system, the sample maps. Then we use both things to try to rehab correctly the structures. So in any case, this very soon was pretty short of space and so on. So what they decided was to buy something else, and then in 1962, the Darlings bought a complete lot in Palm Boulevard in West Monroe. That is where it's located right now, the building. The outstanding Darling Mauser, it's a project of that it was built between 1965 and 1966 by Parker Company, and it costs around $100,000 of the era. It has 8,000 square feet. And what it grabs my attention is not only that it's naturally representing the style of a mid-century building, but I was captivated mainly because the color of the bricks. I'm going to tell you my theory, and also supported by the Woolworth building that is located in downtown. And as you can see, it has folded pool concrete roof with cantilever trusses, and the corresponding concrete columns are precisely giving a kind of modulation to a wall. If you are an architect, what you do not want is to bore people or to bore your architecture with simply a flat wall. What you want is a kind of movement. So how he does this movement? By simply cutting and giving a rhythm, because mainly scale and rhythm are the essential basic things when you are an architect and you want to do a good building. So he does with the modulation, and then later on we will see what happened with the brick. So facing West Monroe, you can appreciate here that there's a wall to the left, wall to the right, symmetrical. These are, let us say, the offices and so, and it's split by a main area that it has the logo and the name of the company. You can see that the wall is divided again by a stacked, vertical brick column that is constituted with exactly the same brown color that you have here. You are put it in a pattern way that is called sailor here. That means that stands on the short edge, or in the large way, showing the large face here. And the other one is what is a header, that it shows simply the little area of the brick. And that's enough. Then what you have here is the gutter. So he is intelligently using, having a rhythm on the wall, and at the same time using precisely the stacked column to just run all the water from the roof. You can see that the brick here is tricolor. It has a very tan brick, an intermediate, and a dark brown, as I'm going to refer later, thinking about why he chose so many colors. That's not usual. Well, you play with these kind of colors to create a kind of vibration on the facade, so the facade moves. You know, I mean, you are never bored, so okay, you have already worked the facade, you create the rhythm, that's good. But also, I mean, you create a kind of movement. So, okay, that's a facade that says something. And also what it happens is, if you go around Brownsville, okay, let us see, this is the left area that is repeated. And then what happens is that you continue to the left, and you have a different volume in actually what's behind, well, the more important area of the building, that is precisely a chapel. So that's the reason why he differentiates this. But take a look here, because I'm going to show you later on another mid-century mortuary example that I don't like so much. So you can see here, let us say a cube for the offices, another cube but for higher and bigger for the chapel, because it's a noble area. And that naturally just turns and face Palm Boulevard with exactly the same height, creating, I mean, again, this butterfly canopy with the trusses and so on. So what happened, you can see here, this is a detail of the old Cameron Courthouse in Jefferson Street. Currently the lodge is that depending on where you put the brick, when you are firing it, you have different colors. You can have yellow, you may have red, if it is too bold, and you have intermediate colors. So what I do feel that he's creating is exactly the same pattern as happened to be 100 years before, because the lack of, maybe knowledge in firing the brick. You have different, if you see all, not painted, but all facades in Brownsville of all the brick buildings, such as this one, that was designed by Preston, but built by Samuel Brooks. Samuel Brooks is another local architect, but he came from New Orleans. He's buried in the old city cemetery. You would see that the pattern is exactly the same. I mean, you don't have one single color, you have many. So I don't think that he's reproducing that in the facade of the Brownsville. You can see also here he's using the other kind of language of mid-century model, the V roof for the parking space. This is wonderful how the column just is a trapezoidal column, and this is another thing that happens to be in the mid-century buildings, that is signage that catch the attention of the viewer. So he's with just a simple movement, he knows where to fit the signage, he knows how to, okay, let us work with the same stuff that I'm doing. I'm going to do the noble area of the building and how I'm going to turn. That, I can tell you that not so many architects could know how to treat these kind of things. Okay, what are the potential influences? This was the first mortuary house built in the United States, 1953, San Francisco. Okay, it's another kind of work, no? It's absolutely cantilever of this area, somehow follows a kind of very old design of Franklin Wright on the 1930s, nothing to do exactly, but some reminiscences. And this was the absolutely outstanding building, the first building that opened, the mid-century modern for the mortuary houses, because that's a problem. I mean, the use of a building, I mean, it could be easy to do a residential mid-century house or the typical office building, but how are you going to deal with a funeral home? I mean, and where are the references? So this was the first one. I guess that Robert Velten would know it. And this is the example that I want to speak about. That is another funeral home designed and built in 1961 in Phoenix, Arizona. Probably Velten knew it, because I can tell you have been researching how many buildings could I find of this, and it's not a usual example of this. And if I was Bob Velten, how would like? The matter is that here the treatment of the building. This is the chapel. Nothing strange. You would see a lot of Baptist, Methodist chapels in the United States that follows this kind of triangular, shape, and the rest is naturally the offices and so on and so forth. So what it happens is, okay, you have let us say right there, a kind of, okay, this is bigger than the rest, so it catches my view. It's treated with a different material. Treated in a very, I would say, yeah, you catch the attention. So what? To me, it doesn't say too much, especially when you are continuing the building, like okay, you have a cube and then something triangular. So all right, I don't like too much. Maybe you would like it. Congratulations. But to me, it's this same example. I may be choosing a wall. There's a wall to the left of the Darling Mouse. You can see when you leave this conference. Okay, it's very also mid-century, protecting or preserving the view of the air conditionings that are behind, but it's nothing to do. You have something that is not linked with the other stuff. And let us go back to see what a master of architecture does. Oh yeah. There's a correspondence. You have your cube of offices, but with the same materials. You don't need new one. You only have to know, you must know, okay, that naturally, if you're going to do a novel area, that novel area should catch you the attention and so, but that's enough. You simply design something that is higher. And that will be more than enough. You are using exactly the same, all the time, the same language, so you are consistent. You are not creating anything new. Okay, you have the columns here, concrete columns, trusses. The trusses that right now you can see that they are supported by the bricks. And then the contrast is I'm going to put cantilever here because this is my building that is important. If I do exactly the same and I put this, well, that's not a lot. Here, naturally, the entrance is covered, so the cantilever truss is somehow not exactly, But here, well, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it frontally and accenting it with the pillars. So to me, again, it's a way to, with the same resources in this case, I'm going to resolve different uses for the same building. Second building that I love so much, it's the Woolworth, built between 1961 and 1962. 1335 is the Elizabeth Street. Okay, what do I understand from this building that is treated in a very different way? Okay, there's no tricolor brick here. There's only a continuous wall, tan color. And then suddenly, I have these little columns that again modulates. If you remember the other example, is modulating all the time. Why? Hey, can you imagine this wall without anything here? Yeah, there are a lot of 1930s building in that way, building in the United States, and 1940s, Art Deco and so on. Oh, yeah, all right, but you only see a wall. So by modulating again, he's creating a kind of something different, a movement, Now what happens is that, here you can see better, modulating, he again gives a kind of movement to the parapet, and at the same time is the other way to compensate a huge canopy. This is the original canopy that the building has. So if you see him from the other part of the sidewalk, okay, yeah, you see the typical language of mid-century modern, aluminum, anodized, anodized aluminum, glass, huge storefront of glass, and then I'm compensating, I have nothing transparent, then suddenly a mass here that is naturally is not transparent, and the way to balance this huge horizontal area with another horizontal huge canopy is by giving that rhythm that changes between the interior little columns that he created here. You can see that it's around 2 feet, and the wider part of the dark brick here, and the one that are located in the corner that are 1.5 feet. Why is he doing this? Well, it's not only a very recurrent mid-century model tool that they use, but somehow he's probably saying, okay, let us treat in the same way that in the old border brick buildings we do have these protrusive cornices. This is another example. Okay, let us do it in the same way, but instead of horizontal, vertical. Why he's doing this? Well, the first one that resolved this issue was Trimble, right, again, in the Johnson Wax building, 1936 to 1939. You have a huge mass, horizontal, huge mass of offices. These are the famous offices that are also underground and with the columns that are like how do you say, like champignon, etc. How do you say? Like a mushroom. All right. So these are the famous offices that has this kind of mushroom columns. So again, if you don't have anything, because you only see a wall of hundreds of feet, so what about stuff, So the way to compensate again is with the glass sky scrubber, and also it's a transparent against solid mass. And what are the potential influences? Well, honestly, I think that is the Corpus Christi woolworth that still is there. Why? Well, it's the same pattern. Now what it happens is, okay, these canopies, there's a more carefully designed, only the corner and part of the chaparral street. But instead of a good architect could find that, hey, this is a good result, but he's not going to be so dummy to copy the same result, because then the people will go to Corpus Christi and say, oh, well, he said exactly, he did exactly the same. Well, no, what he's doing is, okay, this facade, this one, you can see here, this again has its rhythm, but in this case, the stacked vertical column is set back. It's not protruded, as in the example of Brownsville. Therefore, there's a woolworth nearby Brownsville, resolved in 1954 with this same pattern. Now I have less parapet, because this is probably a second floor for sure. So I still do need modulations, but I do not need modulations with such a distance. Why? Because I don't have these sides. Again, if you remember what I said before, it's a matter of scale and rhythm. And that's what I see all the time here with designers and drafters. Oh my, how do they, for example, design a column? If you have this wall, yeah, you can have this, but you need a separation. If you have a shorter one, then you have to give more accent. Otherwise, if you have a shorter and you have this distance, that doesn't work at all. You need something here. And that's exactly what happened in the Brownsville example. So it's all about architecture. In this case, well, you have a second floor, those windows probably for offices or whatever. And now finally, this is, let's say, a later example of a mid-century model building. This is 1968, 1969. Teachers Credit Union is in front of the Courthouse. And you can see again masterwork of Velten, how he can resolve practically nothing building with the minimum resources, but look how he does it. Okay, one floor, very good. Always with money, very tighty money, you know? How he does it. Oh, okay, you have, I can see here, okay, there are 4 materials. Okay, we have brick, we have these windows, we have the entrance, and then we have this concrete floor. But how does it work? Okay, what is he doing is, these spaces northeast. So if I open a window there, I'm going to receive all the sun early in the morning until 11 something, 12, when the sun is sitting here. You know, because that's the position of the sun. The sun starts here, then it goes 11, 12, and then the very cold sun that we have in the afternoons here going to the west. So yeah, I need light here, but at the same time I need protection. So I'm going to protect my building with a perpendicular door. If you go to East Lake Street, you will see an outstanding mid-century modern building designed by a Romanian who was a teacher in Edinburgh. This kind of blue tile building that you have in the block, in the 9th block of East Lake Street. And again, he's putting perpendicular the door, otherwise he's going to face precisely what you don't want, that is the sun. He's creating with the same brick that frame these windows. He's creating another perpendicular structure to the already one that you have. And why is that? Is that a capricious or something? No. Is that if you see the sun, okay, the sun is hitting here, but as soon as he moves, as he moves here, without reaching 11 o'clock, 11:30, what it happens is that this is going to slightly protect you a little bit more. Now, in the modern times, when you go to the architectural school and you study all these kind of methods to try to be, how do you call it, resilient and all those, these probably in the modern times will be bigger, because then you can grant shape inside. So you will have the light, but you do not have the sun hitting on the glasses. So what you have here is simply that with minimum resources, you can see it better, same pattern of brick. Now the 3 go to the canopies, the protective door. Look to this detail, how he extends the brick, but again he's giving a little accent. He's not needed a lot. And at the same time he's starting here a new element that is simply the wall that he's creating in this area, and you will see how he created that wall. So then here we go. So with the same, let us say the same height of the canopy, he's creating the other 3 for the windows. And now he's using simply the material that he's using here. But look at this, 1, 2, 3 concrete blocks. Why? You know why? I have already said. At 11 something, the sun is here. So if you want to maintain a kind of insulation, instead of putting 1 concrete block, hey, he's multiplying by 3 the wall. So again, he's creating the porch with practically nothing. That is, okay, 2 lights, the thick canopy, the concrete block that is just simply, okay, facing now East Madison Street, and then the rest of the park. And that's it. He doesn't have done anything more. The 3 blocks, and the rear that is exactly the same. You can see here that the height of the canopies are exactly the same. And again, he's cutting this kind of thickness with the movement of the 4 columns that wrapped the windows. And I think that's what I was trying to explain about that. You can see here, I have the lock of of seeing these drawings when Roberto Ruiz, really talked to us because there was no space. He said, yeah, what I'm going to do? When I'm going to talk, no, you can't talk. Let's speak with DHA and so on and so forth. And when you go through the drawings, you know that you are in front of a good architect, and believe me that I know there's an architect here. We don't have a lot of, let us say, respect for many architects back in Europe, American architects. But you can see that when you go through the drawings of Velten, you can see even the calculations of, okay, I'm going to do this. How much is this wood going to resist if I put this weight? He works with concrete, okay, this beam, and you can see the calculations, because you already know how to calculate, the calculations of the corresponding, floor, so he can simply design what he wants regarding the weight. That's how you work when you are a good architect. You do the scheme, but the scheme is simply today, or at least nowadays, the scheme is simply the answer of the structure that you have created. So structure and scheme has to be tied. Otherwise, it's as you saw before, the triangular building with the other one. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's a classical mid-century, but it's not the masterpiece that we have here with the Darwin Mozart. I would like to, I insist, to visit the house, because in the house, you are going to notice, there's a little hole on the entrance, and you will see that it's simply the classical Japanese style. That is, the sun moves, and I catch the sun moving, and then you can see the shape changing on the entrance wall. That's a recurrent stuff that Japanese architects use all the time, from Tadao Ando to whoever you want to mention. So that's when you say, and that's when you realize, hey, this guy is something. And that's the reason why I think that we should have to really pay attention to him. The rehabilitation that these people did in their house allow them to be some years in the tax exemption program, even when it was a building designed in 1972. And I hope that someday it's going to be a state marker as well. And what it should have to happen from after this meeting is that simply the people would start to say, okay, well, where I can find more buildings of Velten to try to buy a house designed by him or whoever, because this is the classical thing, such as Clayton could be 100 years ago in Galveston. This is an architect that developed his style and the way he was in Brownsville, and well, right now it's just the beginning. But believe me, if I have the opportunity to study a little bit more and write about him, well, it's the architect that would give a differentiated meaning to the architecture in Brownsville. So thank you very much.